Hey, and welcome back to another episode of PCP, Pop Culture Preservation. We've got a new guest with us here tonight. Cam, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Well, my name's Cam. I'm from the Toronto area. And
That's in Canada.
Well, it's really far away. It's cold up there.
Be careful, or we're going to build a wall on your border, too.
We've already started.
How dare you? Why don't you tell, what do you do up there in Toronto?
Well, me, I assist, I'm a manager in retail. I work at Costco. It's very boring. So by night, I play video games. I collect everything to do with video games, read, research, all that.
Cool. So Jays tells me that you're a bit of an expert in this generation of games. We're talking about Sega today, the rise of.
I lied a little. His credentials are a little, but I'm friends with him, so yeah, he's on. No, actually, Cam is an epic collector. I've known Cam for like 2.5, 3 years now, and you get some good stuff, man. And he's definitely an expert.
If you could pick your favorite piece in your collection, what would it be?
Wow, that's a stacked question. Immediately coming to mind would be my my copy of Final Fantasy III for Super Nintendo. That's probably my favorite game, and I would take that game to the grave with me.
Cool. All right, and Jay, what have you been up to this week?
Well, I've had an interesting week. As you know, Team 1UP, in addition to like trying to create a video game museum out of this wonderful gallery we find ourselves in, we do a lot of installations for video games, and we actually did an installation for the cast and crew wrap-up for John Wick 3. I got to shake Keanu Reeves' hand, and while doing it, I realized Common was standing to my left, and I totally geeked out, and just awesome. It was really, really awesome night, great night, good for morale. The guys on the team had a good night.
That's a rapper.
Yes, and an actor.
For those of you who don't know.
It was a cool experience, though, but as always, I'm very glad to be back right here.
We were chatting before the show, me and you're blanked on your name. I was thinking about
It's the
Common.
heat in here. The Common. Well, my name is Common. It's Jay.
My God,
my name.
So Jay and I were talking outside, and he was like, "When do you remember? What was your first experience with the Sega?" And I thought like 89. What did I come up with? Like 89.
Yeah, 89. Yeah. I think. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
You blew my mind and brought out.
Well, this wonderful piece of equipment right here. So we were talking about it, and like I think most people's experience was Sega Genesis, right? And '89 is when it came out, but that's not where it started. This in front of us is actually the third version of Sega's first console ever, which was initially only released in Japan, but it did hit other markets except for the North American market. So this is the Sega Mark III, the third version, but the original version is the Sega SG-1000.
Let's pull up a picture.
Well, we should, because we don't own it.
Boom, SG-1000.
Look
at that.
That's a hard thing to find, my friend. That's just pure retro gold. So like I said, this is the third version of that. We also have a picture of the SG Mark II as well. We could punch that up, show everybody. It's very similar to the Mark III. Once you see the Mark III, you realize it wasn't that big of an upgrade.
That was a big thing with Sega, as we're about to find out. They like to reiterate.
Yes, they really do. And we find that, in other consoles today, right?
We do. We've had the big one, Nintendo. Lean back.
Yeah, great.
They've got usually their handhelds. We had the Game Boy, and then the Game Boy Pocket, and then the Game Boy Color.
You also had that with NES too. You had the cheaper version of the NES, which was later the top loader. So you can see that throughout through gaming. The interesting thing about this is, it's like as if Nintendo and Sega were destined to have a rivalry. This was literally released in 1983, the same exact day that Nintendo Famicom was released. Nintendo Famicom happens to be the NES, but it was only released in Japan under the name Famicom. And we'll talk about that. That's also happened throughout Sega's history. This is a really amazing thing. It works off of cartridge-based games, but in addition to that, it also had what we like to call the Sega cards, about the size of a credit card. Really interesting.
Look at that thing.
These were made because they would go right in the front, actually. Maybe I'll show real quick right here. So you would slide that in, or you would go in with your cartridge right there. These were made because they had less memory, but they were cheaper. So it was kind of like a budget game, but some of the best games on this system were on this card. The interesting about this system was it was not a commercial success by no stretch of the imagination. It failed, and the library was really small. For example, the NES had over 700 official games. This, on the other hand, only had 100, less than 100. 68 cartridge games, 29 official card games. So this is really rare, really hard to find, especially considering it was only released in Japan. But
Speaking of Japan, I think we have a Japanese commercial we can pull up.
oh, it's just, you're gonna love this. This is pure gold, by the way.
優子勉強ばっかりしてないでどんどん遊ばないとほらほら遅れるじゃないのとたまには言われてみたいよね遊びましょう
楽しいゲームがいっぱい
She was really excited.
Yeah, she
She was
was.
really excited.
Oh boy, you don't get commercials like that anymore. Or maybe you do. I don't,
Well, no,
I don't
no, you
pay
don't.
attention
No,
to Japanese commercials.
yeah, I'm not really a fan of Japanese commercials. I don't really like stay up all night, but that one I could watch over and over again. Like, thank you for screaming at me. I really appreciate that. But that was just Japan 1983, right?
I remember it well
Yeah,
when I was -5.
maybe +1. I'm getting old. You're +1 too.
Positive
Yeah,
one as well.
We're two old guys.
That's how we say ages.
Yeah, +1. I don't know. It's all good. But a really, really great piece of equipment. This was an 8-bit console, but it was it wasn't what really got Sega started in the U.S. market. They took this version, the Mark III, they repackaged it again, and it brought us to the first console that was ever released in the North American market for Sega, which is the Sega Master System. My aunt had this system growing up. This is a good system. It just wasn't NES, you know.
No.
So we have some really good ports of Rampage.
Rampage, the movie, or the game they made into a movie with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
It's so bad.
30 years later.
30 years later.
I have to say I'm pretty impressed with that movie because they like took a movie that had no plot and they made a plot. They tried.
They did try. They tried real hard.
Tried is the key word.
They
yeah.
really tried. I got free movie tickets to go see that, by the way. They had Warner Brothers actually had Team One Up and go there to one of the pre-screenings. So like I shouldn't be talking ill of it. I thought it was entertaining, but
Oh, I love
it's
anything
not-
that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson
it's-
does.
but it's
too
not-
bad he couldn't be in the game.
definitely not an 8-bit anyway. We couldn't handle him. But it was a great system, man. And we talked about
I think we have a picture of. Well, actually, let's pull up the commercial of the Master System.
Sega challenges you with the ultimate video games. Games that'll blow you away. Like Alex Kidd in Miracle World. And coming soon, Monopoly. Knockout games like Rocky. Gangster Town. And shift into more excitement with the arcade hit Outrun. Only on the Sega system.
Yeah, nothing like an excited 80s kid just.
I was that excited 80s kid, man. I'll be honest with you. This was like an exotic piece of equipment, right, Cam? Not many people own this back in the day.
I'll tell you why it wasn't exotic for me, because I actually had one.
Did you?
I,
So this made its way up into Canada.
unfortunately.
I love.
See, I'm on the other end of the spectrum, whereas everyone had Nintendo, I was the poor kid with Sega.
Well, I actually thought it was a great system. Like I said, my aunt actually had this when I was growing up, so like I was able to compare NES. And I think you know, in retrospect, like the NES compared to this, I feel like this held up really well. It just, you kind of had that feeling because every other kid had the NES, man.
Well, that was the thing, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you didn't have Nintendo, you had nothing.
This is true. Until '89.
Until.
'89. No, you know, I would say that just before we move on to that, I just wanted to talk about this. This is the Model 2. What makes the Model 2 version interesting is the fact that they removed this. So the Master System kept its original ability to play cue cards, but once they came out the second version of it, that was it. It was kaputs.
No more cards.
No more.
Not until Nintendo did it years later.
Yes, very, very many years later. It was so,
Although I don't think Nintendo's had these little nubbins on the bottom. I think those were like, you had to swipe them. You had to swipe like 5 of them to play.
Yeah, it was a strip. Whereas these are actually the contacts. Maybe this actually is kind of interesting. Maybe we'll talk about it. If you see the brass contacts on the bottom, you know, it's just like the NES cartridge. You got to make sure these are clean nowadays. If you get your hands on these little rubbing alcohol, clean it up really good. There's another famous system that uses uses these, and that's the TurboGrafx 16. In a future date, I'd love to do a very in-depth look at the TurboGrafx 16.
I only know about that because it was on the Wii eShop, and I was like, "What is this?"
Probably one of the best 16-bit systems. And by the way, you're looking at an expert on that. This is one of the best collectors of TurboGrafx.
TurboGrafx, one of my favorite consoles to date. Never played one until about 4 years ago, and since then it's become one of my favorite consoles. It's easily my favorite console that I didn't grow up with. Awesome library of shooters, side scrollers. Just didn't get the exposure it needed at the time, and it was crushed by Nintendo and Sega.
Yeah, Nintendo and Sega, their epic rivalry.
Weebles wobble.
Their epic rivalry. I think now we have a modern rivalry between Sony and Microsoft.
And it's pretty impotent.
Although, yeah, it's not. There's like a triad that they do where Nintendo will come out with some gimmick and it'll go well. Like the Wii went really well, and then they tried to copy it.
And they dropped the ball with the Wii U.
And then it was like the Kinect and the PlayStation Move, and that didn't work real well.
I think that what's interesting about what's going on now, like if we compare Nintendo to PlayStation, I think what's interesting is what we saw happen with the Sega Genesis and the NES and the Super Nintendo, right? Where we have this adults play PlayStation 4, kids play Nintendo Switch, right? Like that's that's Nintendo's thing. Like they always kind of cornered that family-friendly market.
They did.
We're starting to see that change a little with the Switch, but
the Switch is like surprising me with all the mature games that they keep pumping out because they're for a while we're like, no, we don't.
Third parties are excited.
Don't do that.
Third parties are really excited about it now. But
back in the 80s, Nintendo and Sega were neck and neck, and they pushed each other to innovate and innovate and innovate. And then we got to the Genesis, which really had
this is the best Sega's ever been.
Absolutely. I think everybody has
Yeah.
played the Genesis at some point. I never owned one, but like every one of my friends did.
You take this entire table, and don't do it because this crap's expensive, but you just swipe this whole table clean, and this is what America or Canada and most Europeans, when I think of Sega, their mind goes right here.
And let's pull up the commercial that made it that way. I think we all remember this slogan.
Yes.
Genesis does.
16-bit arcade graphics.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis does.
16-bit sports action.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis does.
Get Joe Montana free, Pat Riley free, Buster Douglas free, Super Monaco GP free, or Collins free.
Genesis does.
What Nintendo don't? Buy a 16-bit Genesis system between now and October 31st and get an extra game.
Genesis does what Nintendo don't.
I'm gonna tell you right now,
Great advertising
I can watch
campaign.
that commercial over and over again, man. I still get like chills. You know,
It was such a shot across the bow of Nintendo. Like, hey, we're here, and we're not taking any more of your crap. We're in the race now. We're gonna get those cool kids.
I mean, how could Nintendo compete with it? I mean, Jesus, they were still really headstrong. Going headstrong with their NES. So you had the 16-bit system, coming out in 1989, and I mean, like, it just took Nintendo by, they didn't know what to do with it.
It was the older kid system.
Yeah.
It was mature. It was cool. It was black.
Yeah.
Had games with violence like Mortal Kombat, and then also a running hedgehog that they tried to make
cool.
But look at Mario; he's just a chubby plumber. Now we got this sleek, cool blue guy with spikes. And running shoes.
It's absolutely from their mascot to their marketing, right? Like it was all about being the cool teenager that could play Sega. But that commercial in particular, I could watch it over and again because I'm thinking like, oh my God, Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, which is a phenomenal game. All right, like you guys got to try it. If you haven't tried Moonwalker, it's a lot of fun. I don't know. What are your thoughts on Moonwalker?
Oh, it's so iconic. But the game itself is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, if you can get past the fact that you're playing as Michael Jackson,
and not
rescuing
with,
children.
And not with Michael Jackson, I don't know. Womp, womp, womp. Someone said it. That you got Moonwalker, Altered Beast.
Altered Beast.
Altered Beast, a great
Everybody
arcade port.
remembers that.
And that's the other thing. Maybe we could talk about Sega. Like one of the virtues of Sega is arcade ports. We're gonna do another episode where we go later into Sega's life, and that's where we could really talk about some really quality arcade ports. At these eras of gaming, the arcade ports weren't quite perfected yet, But you look here, this is an arcade port. This is an arcade port. Mortal Kombat is an arcade port.
Yeah.
You know, right on this table without even trying, we just pulled off great Sega arcade ports. So, you know, it was good stuff. You know, I'm really excited to dive into, you know, later episodes about like, you know, maybe the fall of Sega.
Because, like we said, the Genesis is definitely where they peaked.
Yeah, 100%.
And it was downhill from there.
Well, they had some really good moments, but it was definitely like you can start to see cracks in the armor. You know, after
absolutely.
Sega. That's where I would say it started. It was a long slippery slope down, right? Like it took them, you know, over a decade, but they screwed up. You know, they really did. I don't know. What are your closing thoughts on the Sega Genesis? Again, give us a good memory, man.
It stands the test of time. The Genesis was never a console I had as a kid, but when I was a kid, I loved going to my friend's house and, you know, playing Sonic or what have you, right? Contra Hardcore.
So you had Sega Master System, but you didn't have Sega Genesis?
Oh, I jumped ship.
Really
I jumped ship right away from that Master System.
your parents really hated you. You know, for me, it's the same thing. You know, I didn't have the Sega Genesis initially when it came out. I mean, I did get it like 2 years later, so I was in that era. You know what I mean? But I remember seeing those commercials, and you're like, oh man, I need to have this thing, man. And you know, I still have that feeling.
I was a little bit younger than, or am still.
Yeah, it's true. You're -5, right?
-5. But no, when the Genesis came out, I was a little older, and it was around for a while. So I remember like my older cousins had it, and I was always like, oh, I want to play the game with the violence and the blood and the blood effects. Mortal Kombat really like. It's a violent game.
Yeah, you know, you know, you shouldn't be like.
It's lost its luster now, but back then when you couldn't really see what was going on and there was just all this gore and stuff spraying on the screen,
Yeah,
it seemed more visceral.
It was so much more fun. I will say this for the record, though. I still feel like the Super Nintendo version is a better game, but it was so great to be able to put a code in and have that violent blood come out of these guys. But it's a joke now. If you haven't played the original Mortal Kombat, you will kind of laugh about what we're talking about because it's pretty. You know, like toned down for this era. But
Yeah, but it wasn't at the time. We hadn't seen anything like that.
The idea of blood being in a video game at home was unheard of at the time.
There's a really cool story. I know we're gonna have to wrap it up soon, but there is a really cool story about Mortal Kombat. When they were doing the testing for it, and they had the original arcade machines out, they just brought random strangers in to do the testing, and a young kid accidentally did Sub-Zero's fatality for the first time. And the developers thought that there were going to be months before people, if ever, figured out there were fatalities. They didn't want to tell anybody. So here's this kid accidentally rips, you know, someone's head off in the game, and he runs up to the developer, and he goes, "Oh, I did this." And the developer goes, "I have no idea what you're talking about. You can't do that," because he wanted to keep it a secret. So this poor kid was the whole rest of the day was running around trying to rip someone's head off again and do a fatality, and the bastard wouldn't tell him how to do it and wouldn't even acknowledge it. I'll leave you with that. I thought that was a great Mortal Kombat story. And violence. Good stuff.
Yeah. Who doesn't love violence?
We do.
So, yeah, that was Sega. That was their rise. I did not know about either of these. I maybe have heard of this, but that one, for sure, never seen or heard of.
They all deserve their own in-depth look. I think it's just nice that we can, like, real briefly just be like, guys, there's more to these things. You know, there's more than just that. We can go pretty far back with Sega. Yeah.
Next week, we're going to take a look at what was it?
We're gonna pick up
future of Sega.
Yeah,
not
we're
the future.
not the future.
The past.
Well,
the future now.
Yeah, we're gonna pick up from the Sega CD console, and we're gonna actually really talk about how Sega just couldn't let go of this console, and they stayed with it too long. Cool. So and then we'll take it from there, and we'll talk about other consoles later on, and then the fall.
Absolutely.
Dreamcast 9999.
Where dreams go to die.
It was so good.
But guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of PCP. If you have any comments or suggestions or like stuff you want to hear about, give us a comment down there.
Don't do that. I don't handle criticism well at all.
Mostly criticize Jay. And then tell me how great I look and tell Cam how wonderful his mustache is. You know, just like general YouTube stuff. Go ahead and hit that like button or subscribe or the bell. I don't know. All the YouTube stuff. Tell your friends. Explain to your grandma. You know, all the things. But thanks for tuning in. We here are. I mess it up every time. I'm gonna get it one day.
You really?
No, I have like a tagline
that I
want to do, but I never do it right.
I wish you told me this so I could remind you.
I know, but I'm gonna get it. Here we go. Hold on.
Okay.
We're called Much Obliged TV because we're happy to have you. Thanks for coming.
I felt warm. Nice. Bye.
Bye.